More than a few investors are jittery ahead of Sunday's vote in Italy. It's a highly anticipated constitutional referendum now. If the vote is no, Prime Minister Renzi says he will resign. And of course, that leaves room for the anti-establishment populist party to gain even more momentum. Remember, after Brexit and Donald Trump's victory, Italy actually could be the next blow to that utopian notion of one grand central government, and it could change the fate of the European Union. Joining me now to discuss, John Tamny and Nile Gardiner. Now, let me start with you. On the political side, I think the stakes are perhaps even higher than the economic side. It's you got a lot of votes coming up, the Netherlands, France, and other places, and this is a wave. This populism wave is really it's a tidal wave.
No, you're absolutely right, Charles. You know, the winds of change are sweeping across Europe at this time, and the referendum vote on Sunday is just the latest opportunity, I think, for those winds to move powerfully across Europe. You could see the collapse of the Italian government. This is, after all, the 63rd Italian government in 70 years. And it's a socialist government. It's unpopular. There's rising unemployment at 35%. Youth unemployment. You have public debt at 132% of GDP. It's an unsustainable situation. You could also, of course, have a run on the banks as well. And bit by bit, the European project, this grand supranational entity, is starting to fall apart. And you may see the rise of Eurosceptic parties in Italy, a backlash against the ruling political elites. But Italy, I think, is just the latest country in Europe to face possibly momentous change.
John, I guess the most leverage that Brussels, the ECB, and perhaps Germany, that I call it maybe that trifecta of power that would love to glue this thing together, is the fact that Italy is on a precipice of economic collapse. And maybe that they will be the ones who buy all that bad debt they have and things like that and inject cash. I mean, what else could they say? And what happens if Italy says, we want to kind of go it alone, and they can't sustain themselves economically right now?
Well, I think they can. I think, as evidenced by their ability to take on all this debt, is that investors believe in something going on there. But this notion that Italy can escape the EU is overstated, and I think the EU's demise is overstated. I'm not a fan of it. But remember, Italy can leave the euro, but it's not going to leave the euro. Good luck trying to raise debt, or for companies to try to raise money in lira if it goes back to its own currency that it wants to devalue.
Well, John, what about the notion of controlling your own destiny and having your own central bank?
I think that's absurd. Would the U.S. be a more prosperous country if we had 50 different central banks? I am not defending the EU, but let's be clear, the much bigger and more intrusive government is in each country. Think how poor the U.S. would be if we had a different currency for each of our 50 states. We're lucky to have a common dollar. Europe's lucky to have a common euro.
And nevertheless, Nile, since its introduction, it's hard to call it an economic victory. And of course, there are the other things that taking down these barriers has made it easier for migrants to go throughout the country. And there's a lot of pushback because there's Euroscepticism. It's part policy. It's also part immigration or migration. And it's a serious, ugly mess. And it feels like there is a tidal wave happening. And I don't know how hard it would be to take this apart or how smart it would be, but I feel like it can happen now.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there are momentous changes happening in Europe. A lot of Europe's elites are, frankly, in denial. And the European Union is not the United States here. What you have within Europe is the suppression of national sovereignty and self-determination. These are very powerful forces. And Europe's ruling elites, frankly, are, I think, out of touch with public opinion in many, many European countries. The European project is a monument to a big government, high taxes, soaring public debts. The euro, frankly, is, in my view, a political project more than anything else. And you will see bit by bit countries peeling away from the European single currency, starting with nations such as Greece, potentially Italy as well. Yeah,
and of course there's the structural issues like the low birth rates and aging populations and things like that. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I got to break a rate.